I need
All
to
right.
display the questions.
All right. Sabine is going to sit down in a second here, and you guys just go through the questions and answer, and
Yeah, take time. We need to take a little bit time ourselves, get prepared here.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I'm going to let her do her thing. You can stop this at the end.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
And then come get me. I'll send Kathy up in a little bit to say hello too.
Good.
All right.
Say hi.
So
I hear you, can't see you. What happened yesterday?
Say hi.
What happened is
That you had to stay up till 3 a.m. No, the picture.
no.
I can't see you anymore. What happened?
Oh, I can't see
Ask
it.
Dad. Okay, Dad.
Just a second.
This
Michael?
Is
Fine.
They can't see her. They can't see.
Oh, they can't see Sabina?
Do you have the thing?
That doesn't make sense. There might be the connection on there. Can you hear us still?
Yes, we can still hear, but we can't see you anymore.
Oh,
Does it say
Is
anything?
there something on their side?
I don't know.
Is there a video?
Is
there a video that says?
Hang on. We can.
No. Here's my mother.
Hang on. Let me do something real quick. I might have to join back in a second. Hang on. I'm switching to off the work network.
You drop out?
It should jump right back in.
Hi.
There we go.
Hi.
Hi. I haven't seen you in what? 30 years. Don't listen to you.
All right, we're recording again, and you guys, again, the audio is the important part. So,
Yeah.
If the video goes a little cloudy, don't sweat it.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, but we
See
still can't see you.
Okay.
Oh no.
Are you sending pictures?
We are. The video is on. Hang on.
Okay, it's something.
They to help
Yeah.
bridge any of the.
Oh, we're good. Do you need me to stay? Let me talk. It'll be fine.
So.
Just let me know if there's trouble.
All right. Cool.
As long as it's still recording. We're good.
So did you receive my questions that I wrote at school? Mom, did you send
Yes.
them? Okay. So did you have a chance to read them?
Yes, we had a quick look through.
Okay, so the way that I formatted it, so I have a focus question that I am answering. It's what were the social and economic impacts on East and West Germany after the Berlin Wall came down in 1989? So all my questions are kind of circulating around the focus question. Starting where you want to start, or?
Yeah, we can answer the first question if you want to. Maybe upfront a comment. Germany was occupied directly after the war, but not only by the states and the Soviet Union, but also by two other powers, France and British troops. And then the remaining German Republic, Western German Republic, was under control of the four powers based in Berlin. And it was not an occupation anymore after the Federal Republic was founded. Then it was a control kind of status. Germany was not totally sovereign, but it was under the supervision of the four superpowers. And then later it became when the wall came down and it was reunited, then those nations were sitting together again. It was called the 4+2 negotiations. And so the four superpowers, Poland and Germany, were sitting at the table and agreeing on the reunification. That's just up front. And now your question was, when the Soviets left the United Nations, I don't believe they left the United Nations. They are still a member of the United Nations, aren't they? So that's also not correct.
Interesting, because what they tell you online is how they kept doing like little things, both the United States and Soviet Union, to like one up the other, or I don't know, make them angry or concerned in a certain way. So like they had certain weapons that they used to threaten, and I think at one point they tried to, the Marshall Plan.
Yes, the Marshall Plan. That was later when, or maybe I think, I don't know the year. When was 55?
Das war 49, ne?
49.
49, 50.
Yeah, 49, 50. The Marshall Plan came up. Up front, there was a negotiation, I believe, in the U.S. about Morgenthau and his plan to, or maybe it was British, to actually demilitarize and take the entire industry from Germany and make it kind of a farmland. But then Marshall came up and said, no, we want to invest and grant under the Marshall Program resources, financial resources, in order to build up or be able to let the Germans build up their country. And that was leading into the what you kind of what did you describe it as, a wonder of Germany, German, what did you say, German
economic miracle.
Economic wonder. Yeah, that was the foundation for it. And in East Germany, that did not happen. In East Germany, the Soviets actually ensured to remove the industry, as the Soviet Union also suffered severely by the war. They needed a reparation. They needed a lot of the industrial substance for their own country to build it up, and also Poland and all the other Eastern countries. So they actually took a lot from East Germany, and so it was a totally different starting point for the East Germans compared to the West Germans.
Yeah. There was a lot of differences between like industry and how much like money people were making, and between the East and the West, and when eventually they were dissolved back together. What?
Watch your ums.
I'm sorry.
Just
Very early in the morning.
So again, what's your question?
What's the question? Just ask the question.
So, I was wondering what the relationship was between East and West Germans when the wall was up. Was there like any? Did they ever? Were you ever in contact with anyone on the East side when you're in the West, or like? Did people often help people escape, or?
Hattet ihr noch Familie da? Hattest du Kontakt zu den Ostdeutschen? Wenig, aber wie war das Gefühlslage bei, als die
kamen, waren sie selbst
als die Mauer hochkam, also im August?
Im August. Da war das Problem, dass der Bruder von Ömi in Hamburg war, weil er hier abhauen wollte drüben. Seine Familie war noch im Osten. Und jetzt musste der schnell wieder nach Berlin und wieder rüber zu den Osten kam, bevor er dicht gemacht wurde.
Okay, yeah, we had some family members who were in East and in West. Parts of the family were in West Germany, parts of the family were in East Germany. And when it became clear that the wall would be built up or set up, they had to reunite quickly in order not to be split forever. So because in the beginning they just started increasing the personal barriers for personal crossing the border by checking the passports and so on. But then suddenly they would not allow anyone to pass anymore. And once that was done, even on the green borders, they would ensure suddenly a fence and build up the wall, so it finally was not possible to cross border anymore. So when that picture became clear, people had to decide on which side of the border they would want to live. And of course, most of them decided to move to their families. And so the uncle of my father was in West Germany, and he moved back to East Germany, while his sister and my grandmother and her family, they all stayed in East Germany. Sorry, at the wall they actually moved out of East Germany. They had left already. Is that understandable?
So was it for any of the children living there, was it scary to move across the border, or did they understand the significance of moving?
Yes, to the time, of course, all of the people were scared because they had just experienced the Nazis' suppression, one dictatorship, and now the communist dictatorship had started for many years already, because in East Germany they were starting to take step by step over the control and reduce options for families to live together for ownership of goods and house and land, for example, so that you were step by step not allowed to make decisions on your own. So the suppression was all around, and for example, my father was not permitted to write with his left hand under the Nazis because it was looked at being not good. And because the left, German had to write with the right hand. So they were under pressure as children already in school. And the same behavior started with the communists in East Germany, because they had to participate in certain camps. They had to participate in youth groups, and if they would not, they were not permitted to go to a better school. They were not permitted to develop. They always had to be conform, otherwise they would lose personal flexibilities. So the pressure was in the entire society, and it was a suppression system. So crossing the border was, of course, a very touchy point, because you could always be arrested when meeting police.
When living in the West, was there anyone who wanted to emigrate out of the country entirely? Was that possible, or something that someone would want to do?
Yeah, in the West, you could go wherever you wanted to go. The West was not a closed shop. The East was the problem part. The eastern part of the country, they would not allow anyone to leave.
Would they be able to leave Germany at all from the East, or would even not just like go to West Germany? Would they?
No, you couldn't go to West Germany. Of course, any Western country was not permitted. But if you were, for example, wanted to go to Poland or to Russia, that was sometimes possible if you had still some family left in Germany, because people would be expected to return to their family or avoid the suppression on their family. So if somebody would escape and just escape the Eastern Bloc to the Western Bloc, then if he would go on his own, the family would feel suppression by the state. They would lose their jobs, they would have to do other kind of jobs and maybe get arrested.
Was it definitely more difficult to survive financially in East Germany rather than West Germany because of the? I heard many people lost their jobs because they couldn't cross the border when the wall was put up, and they were separated from like certain resources and goods that they needed to like support their families and live, basically.
Yeah, that was right after the war. It was difficult for both parts of the country because there was just not enough food or industrial power to generate the consumption needs of the people. And everything was just old, and there hadn't been investments for many years. And of course, the war destruction had destroyed all the good infrastructure. So it had to be rebuilt, and that's actually what the Marshall Plan was helping on, that there was money back for investments. However, on the eastern side, money was not the problem. You just couldn't buy anything for it because the goods were not around. Due to the way of economical planning, the entire communist market system was not a capitalist system, so it was not supplying according to the needs of the people. The supply was calculated, and then the people had to take what was planned. And the planning was not sufficient, and that's actually also the reason why the wall came down in the end.
Wow. Yeah. So you lived in both East and West Germany at one time. What were the houses like where you lived? Was it like living there?
Well, yeah, the houses were the same in the beginning, because it was all the same in the beginning. And my parents had a pharmacy. My father and grandfather, they had a pharmacy in East Germany. And when it became, that's when they lived there, and they left 55, 57, 58.
58.
Yeah, the family of my father, the pharmacy family, they left East Germany in 1958, so only 3 years before the wall was put up. And my grandfather had anticipated that step. They had seen several rounds of being taken by the government. I don't know if the government is taking the house, is taking everything. There's a word for it. I don't know it. And so they actually step by step lost their entire assets to the government and their flexibility to run their pharmacy. And then my grandfather decided to leave it all behind. They drove in the end the car to the border, the green border, and just walked with what they could carry across the border and started on the other side of the river. So only in let's say 5 or 3 miles distance to their home, they started a new pharmacy in West Germany. And the house and everything, living standard was at that time the same. Later, due to the different economical systems in East Germany, they developed a lot of skyscraper houses for many families, and in Western Germany you had more individual homes.
Oh, that's different than what I expected. You keep saying green borders. What does that mean exactly? Green borders.
Green border is the border when you have a river and a bridge. And on the bridge, the police is standing and checking everyone who is crossing it. But if you take a boat and go across the river, there's no policeman. That's the green part of the border. If you look at Mexico, you have the desert. Many people cross the border through the desert. That's a green border in the U.S. to Mexico.
So speaking of like the police, were they like understanding of the situation, or were they like harsh or strict? Like my friend's mother escaped. Where did Miss Alana death?
No, don't worry about that. Just ask the question.
So she told me a story about how when she was crossing a border, she was very young, they took and they ripped all the heads off her stuffed animals to make sure there was no like anything like too expensive crossing the border, so they wouldn't be able to survive. Was it just, what was the security like when you crossed? Was it more like security nowadays ish when they like would check you, but then ultimately let you go, or would they like go through your stuff and your belongings to make sure you didn't bring anything over?
Wie waren die Kontrollen an der Grenze? Ihr sind alles aufzeigen?
Wir müssen alles vorzeigen. Das Auto wurde aufgemacht und alles auseinandergenommen und auch im Kofferraum alles vorgezeigt, was man mit hatte. Es mussten die Jacken ausgezogen werden, die Taschen wurden natürlich alle geöffnet. Und wenn du da ein Ostgeld dabei hast, nur 5 Mark oder so einen kleinen Betrag, dann kriegst du schon eine Strafe angedroht.
Okay, so it was quite intense investigation, personal investigation on each person trying to cross. You had to open your jacket. People would touch you if you have some parts you were not permitted to take along. And just for example, if you would carry 5 Eastern German marks, which was not that much at the time, with you, they would confront you with allegations of the visa fraud. So you would face prison if you would get caught on that. And I recall a story from my parents that they, before they decided to find you across the border, they had a couple visits with other family members in West Germany, and every time they would try to take their the plates and for example, they had some good porcelain from the family porcelain. They would actually put butter in it and say they were just going on a picnic, and so they just needed these pieces as a box. And the police would then not really look at it, but it was always very risky, and you had to be very tricky to not being investigated. Cars would be taken apart, checked what is in corners of the car you would normally not look at, and so it was very thoroughly investigation of everything that was crossing the border, and you were always facing arrestment. And my father is pointing out that, especially in the end, the only option was in Berlin, in West, that to cross West Berlin, the border, east to West Berlin, and then take a transit direction. Or the best way would be by airplane, because then you would not be checked.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
When the wall came down, like, how did you feel? Because many people were relieved or were able to reunite with their families. But so how did the destruction of the wall, like, were you happy or like at rest with government, or were you still nervous that something could go wrong in the future, or how did you feel?
Yeah, it was in a way a surprise, even though in our constitution of the Federal Republic, the Western Republic of Germany, it was a pre-note to the constitution that the overall objective of our republic was to be reunited, because that was goal number 1 for any administration in Western Germany. And Eastern German governments always wanted to have 2 German states. So when the war came down, it was more or less a result from the bureaucracy of East Germany and the support of the Soviet Union, Mr. Gorbachev. He actually did not command the East German troops to march up or and to start shooting to the crowds. The East German people would gather every Monday, especially in Dresden it started, but then it started in the entire country. In every bigger town, people would start demonstrating for freedom and one Germany. They would shout, "We are one people." And so it was an enormous emotional fact for both German parts. The 17 million people living in East Germany and the 70 million people living in West Germany, all were partying and very happy. And we have videos of people when the wall was opened and people would cross, that they were greeted by West Germans, even though they didn't even know each other. So it was not just families coming back together, but it was the entire nation coming back together.
So, when the wall was still up, did West Germans, how did they feel about people living in the East, or the other way around? How did people in the East feel about people in the West? Were they like nervous for the other side, or yeah?
In the West, of course, people were sending letters and packages to the East, but everything was checked by the police. So you always had to play some kind of tricks, and sometimes put double money in, so that they would take only half of it. Every letter was checked, everything was controlled, and then from the East you could not get in contact with West Germans, because if you were starting a contact with West Germans, you would be under suspicion and possibly being arrested for not being conform to the system.
Were there ever any peaceful protests, violent protests that ended up? Was there any violence pushed towards people who protested the wall in both the West and the East? I know for the East.
Yes, in former years, they always were taken to prison, possibly shot, or at least arrested and separated. But when the wall came down, it was growing so rapidly, and unhappiness about the poor availability of goods, the poor living standards, that many people started gathering, and they were just walking, and it was like the children of the policemen were walking. So the policemen were suddenly confronting themselves, standing in front with a gun of their own family members. And so they really did not know what to do. They tried to get guidance from above, from their generals, and the generals did not know what to do, because it was also their families, and the political system from East Germany tried to give a clear order, but from the Soviet Union they heard, no, let it go. And so they were just for a moment too weak to take a decision and to save their system. And that moment was enough for the crowds to become brave, and so that almost everyone started walking. And when everyone is walking, then suddenly the police is not capable of coping with the situation, and actually even policemen started walking.
Wow. So before, like many of the protests, there are stories of people like trying to escape, like digging under the wall, or like jumping over buildings close to the wall. Was that like common, or was it just a few stories that just got out?
Yeah, you were playing with your life if you tried to cross the border while the wall was still up. There was a clear direction given to shoot anyone who was crossing the border without permission. So, and there was a very strict system of, it wasn't just a fence, there were mines. You had to cross a zone of sharp dogs who would watchdogs who would try to tear you down and then you would be shot. They wouldn't pick you up always. They wouldn't just arrest you. They would shoot you. They even had systems installed that would automatically shoot at anything that was moving. So it was very difficult, and if there was a river or a lake, within 5 miles you were not permitted to live there without special permission and having been proved or having testified and proved that you are a communist, that you are someone supporting the system fully. And many East Germans had to work for the what you call maybe NSA or what is it? CIA inside of the country. I don't know the right word, and it's probably not comparable, but they had to spy on their own family members. So that was, of course, causing a lot of insecurity and fear to everyone in the system. You couldn't trust anyone, not even in your family. Sometimes the men had to spy on the women and vice versa.
So I know there was in the East there were like many resources that were hard to access. Was there anything like a black market that existed in either side to maybe fill in some of the gaps for?
In the beginning, of course, right after the war, the black market was the only operating market. Then once Western Germany developed with the help of the Allies to become industrial stronger and getting them back to normal operation with good infrastructure and so on, then the black market was reduced and people were actually even proud paying taxes and support the government because it was a new start for the entire Western Germany population, and it was for a long time a free republic, democratic republic. So that was for them very good. On the east side, as said before, if you couldn't get bananas in, let's say, Berlin, you might be able to get them in Dresden. So people would call a friend in Dresden and hear, okay, they have them there, they have bananas, but we have maybe oranges. So then a black market trade would start. Or you could get tiles for your bathroom in one part of the country, but not in the other parts. So people were starting to organize it on a private basis.
So when the country was joined back together, was there like a clear difference between like the industry and financial rates of people on each side? Like, was there still the same span of social ranking between East and West? So was there more? I know there was more poverty in the East, but was there like also poverty in the West, and were there also people who were wealthy in both sides?
Well, poverty is of course a question of definition, and as said before, money was not the problem. And if you define living in a house as being not not a poor person, then it doesn't say anything about the quality of the house. So it's very difficult to take these kind of comparisons and say where you had more quality of living or less, or the ranking, the social ranking in between people. Because, for example, there was a very good academic education in Eastern Germany. But overall, if you define wealth on gross domestic product or so, the western part was many times stronger than the eastern.
So when they were joined together as a country again, did the East ever catch up in industry or GDP, or is it still lacking today, affected today by what it lacked when the wall was up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. There is still a difference that can be measured, but it's much less compared to the beginning of the 90s when the wall came down. Of course, there were a lot of financial subventions from the western part of the country going to the eastern part. For example, we have a solidarity payment on top of our taxes, but every German has it. So whoever is making money, in the beginning, 7.5% on top were paid for rebuilding East Germany and getting it back to a state of art, and now it's still 5.5% on top. But they are actually now discussing getting rid of it, and it's supposed to be reduced again, and maybe in 5 years' time, the solidarity payment will be gone. So at the moment, a lot of money is still transferred to rebuild Eastern Germany, and the problem of Eastern Germany was that actually their industry was quite developed in the Eastern Bloc compared to Poland and other Eastern countries. But when the wall came down, of course the West German companies had suddenly a lot of more market area, and so the Western companies would take over the market because the higher quality of their products. So the East German companies lost the advantage compared to other Eastern European countries economically, and were hit much stronger. But it was compensated by transfer payments from the western part of Germany to the eastern part. But there was a very, very high dependency in the beginning, and that has been reduced now. And also, what was a second big topic to that time is that many West Germans claimed their properties back. And that is also belonging to companies. Just remember my family, the pharmacy. My grandparents had left East Germany in the house. The house was under governmental control, but it was, of course, not democratic dictatorship. And due to that, it was illegal for the Eastern German government to take a house. So after the war came down, the family of my father claimed the house back. And there were many Germans claiming their property, and that was blocking a lot of the development in Eastern Germany until all these discussions were final and it was cleared. And there was also a lot of what you would call unjust behavior, because just for example, in my mother's family, there was one house in a good position, and it was just while the wall was being torn down, made a kindergarten. And before it was part of a police station for spies. And the police stations were given back to the families, but for a kindergarten they would not give it back to a family because it was in overall public interest. So the family of my mother didn't get anything back, and they lost it forever. So there was also a lot of tensions in Germany in that time, and people would lose and have to start over.
So were there any families who were left without a house because they couldn't? So they were ended up living.
I mean, they had left the country. They had left. Yeah, sorry, they had left Eastern Germany, so of course they had left their house, and now they finally lost it. The house of their grandparents, the parents of their grandparents just somebody took it, and of course it took quite some time to really disguise all of the communists and all of the people who would not be fair and okay. So you can't take them all out of the system in one day, because you need to identify those people first. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of unjust behavior continued after the wall came down.
Yeah.
What's that?
Should we finish?
Are you done asking questions?
Yeah. If there's anything else you wanna, I'm done on my questions. But I love listening. So if there's anything you want to say.
I think we covered quite a bit, and you can give us a call again if you want to clarify anything, or maybe have some interest in some other parts. We're very happy that you are interested in this overall topic.
Yeah, it was wonderful listening to you. It was so different than what I had read about. Laura, that just came in the room. Because the stories you read about aren't actually written by people who lived there, so they're in such they're spoken in such a different way that it's not the same story. So to hear all that stuff from you was amazing. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Sure.
We wish you